Hello. So this is a look at how am I going to explain how to do quick mixing, or not rushed mixing, but a sequence you can follow to mix a track. Um, like and subscribe, always appreciated. But seriously, this is a track that I've already recorded Saturday's music school, which is about going from a blank sheet to this. So if you want to see how I compose this, tune in on Saturday for the music school at 10 o'clock, because that is when it's going out. So how do I, as you can see, I've already done some mixing here, but what I want to be able to do is show how I did this. So what do you think about that for a title? 10 out of 10. Right. Right. Let's get a new session open. Well, it's a new version of this so that I can reset everything. So any actually, so I don't want any. First thing I'm going to do is actually level these all out, so they're all at 0. I'm going to have to get rid of all of these plugins. So yeah, this is, all of this has to be condensed for Music Monday, the episode that's coming up. I can't be spending time doing all this. So I think that's everything set back to 0 with no effect on anything. Does it sound like? Actually, I'm going to need that. All that, no effects. So that's the one I'm going to have to use to start with the Music 1 episode. Fancy buying a dulcimer? I was thinking about it, but £1,600 seems quite a lot. Like and subscribe while you wait. Hope everyone's Thursday is going well. So that's when I'm recording this. Okay, so let's see how the sounds are getting it loading up. Slowly, I think is the answer. Because what I haven't done is removed all the articulations. What I should probably do here, we're trying to be sensible, I'm only using pizzicato, what I should do is go in and only have pizzicato because it massively saves on the memory. On 1.27. Maybe it's worth showing that in the video, although it's all about mixing. So the question is, how do you mix and what are you trying to do? At the end of the day, this stereo output track wants to be, when you've all said and done, the highest part wants to be -1 dB. That's the highest you want to go. But when you consider you are mixing multiple tracks together, the different frequencies will mix together. So instruments that all produce low end will build on top of each other to make it seem louder. So the secret of mixing is to try and aim for, I try and get it to about -7, -8 on the stereo out, and then I will do some audio mixing on. Actually, it's a good point because I'm quite used to using Ozone now, and I use that to do everything. But actually for this, I'm going to show the way I used to do it, which is very similar. So I'm going to have to leave some extra room to allow us to do that. So how do I do it? Well, the first thing is choose the loudest part of your track. So let's say that 4 bars. And I'm getting -4 here. So I think that's a bit loud and there's something massively echoey there, which is probably that mosaic bass. The order you go through the tracks doesn't necessarily matter. I prefer to start with bass and percussion and analyze them like that because they're quite obvious sections. If I solo mosaic bass, so that's got quite a big airy echo to it. The first place you can check for it is actually in the instrument that you're using. So if I take that off, still got quite a lot of echo on it. So you could in here, the trouble is this could get quite complicated. That probably isn't the way to explain how to do this. Because because that's the way I would do it. But if you're doing simple, trying to keep it relatively simple, I'm going to say let's just use the EQ. So in Logic, or whatever DAW you're using, you're going to have some sort of EQ. So that airy sound is obviously high frequency. So if we put a low pass filter on it, as in allowing the lows to pass through, the other word for that is a high cut, because you're cutting the highs. So I'm going to say maybe something like that, and I'm not going to lose any of the bass. Some people say you should at least knock off any inaudible parts, like that. There you go. And all I'm doing for the first pass is just soloing each part. So you'll see a similar workflow. I know for this, and you have to listen because you don't want to lose the characteristic of a bass instrument. And bear in mind that some speakers will not reproduce this low end, so you won't even have a bass. Now luckily I do know that we've got cello and bass and low strings as well, which will also have harmonics in. That sounds pretty good. Okay, so I'm quite happy with those four. Bass is too loud, but we'll come to that in a minute. Next, we might as well just come down. So that is a high instrument, obviously. Don't do that, because I'm now editing the cajon. Right. At least select the track you meant to use. How much can we lose? Can't lose that much. Don't think there's anything below there, so let's stick with that. So viola's this mid-range, which is going to be nice. We can make sure we get rid of that guarantees it's not going to step on anything. There we got the cello. It's quite high for a cello. But it's good because it's filling in for those bass notes. It's quite rumbly. If you've got any instruments like this, do be careful about cutting off much above 2K. What you might notice is something like there's something and you might want to tame those peaks maybe. Bear in mind the scale here, which is going 0, 5, 10, 15 dB, so you don't need to do that much to have quite a big difference on these. Quite a nice low sub to it. But some upper harmonics, so let's not cut too many of those off. It's the dulcimer I didn't buy. Don't forget, the higher sounds are perceived as louder, so we will probably need to turn the overall volume of that down. And we're back to the basics. So I'm not going to be able to do all of that in 5 minutes, so I'm going to have to summarize how to do that and then probably speed it up. Maybe just use this video and speed it up. So I've just gone through. It will probably be easier to explain just going from top to bottom, won't it, rather than why I would start on bass. I think just go top to bottom, put an EQ on. Okay, the next step I would do is mixing. So what I'm trying to do now is get a decent level coming out here, which gives me room to still add effects. So at the moment that is too loud. But not too bad. Now, the extreme way to do this is to select all your tracks and drop them to 0. So nothing is coming out now. And then what you do is you slowly build in each one. This is a great way to start off practicing mixing, because you can keep an eye on the stereo output meter as you bring things in. If I just start this playing, let's get some percussion coming in. Bearing in mind, that might be -16, but as soon as I add something else, if the frequencies are overlapping, they'll add to each other. And in Logic, if you need to reset, you just click on the number. This is where you can play around with the different sounds. Okay, so the key part of the tune is the string parts. If you make them too quiet, it sounds like you didn't really mean to use them. Now I can turn up the viola louder. I mean, they're different instruments, but the higher notes will be perceived as louder, even though in decibel terms they aren't. Which is why you only have one piccolo in an orchestra, or one triangle. See, this is slowly creeping up the master out, so we're at -9 now. Again, the Glock, it's a high pitch sound, so it's perceived louder, so I don't actually need to put as much in. Now this is supposed to be light tension, so maybe I can bring that bass down a little bit. I think the percussion is about right. Pretty happy with that as a general mix. You can come back to this later. Breaking this down into 5-10 minutes is going to be a nightmare. But I think that makes sense to show doing EQ pass first to get each individual sound soloed, then bring them all together, starting from a zero mix, and bring it, not a zero, negative infinity, or quiet, and then bring them up, keeping an eye on stereo out. And now that we've got that done, how would I go about it instead of using ozone? So, or indeed mastering effects from Logic now. We're not going to do that. So the way I would recommend from doing it from stock plugins, and this, the reason I would do it this way is because you can hear the difference that each part is making. And when you start using ozone, these things are all put into one together. So you have to be careful with putting an effect like Space Designer or Reverb on the master output. So this wet level is probably going to be too high. But this is where you learn about mixing. So that's really spacey. Then you can A/B it by turning it on and off. Off. Yeah. And each time you do something, it will increase, well, more than likely it will increase the level that you are outputting. So after that bit of space, I would add an exciter. In Logic, there's these two, color 1 and color 2. Color 2 is a bit more subtle than color 1. Then you choose how many, what percentage of harmonics are going to be affected at the frequency you pick. So I want to bring out the high end. Or the low end. That just adds a bit of brightness to it. It's a bit harsher. So I might do something like that. So we've got reverb and exciter. So stereo spread is an interesting one. That massively widens everything, but you probably only want to apply it to the top end and not massively. That gives a little bit of separation there. Then I would probably, to make things relatively simple, use a multipressor, and they often have presets. So for this, deep punch is not what we are going for. In Logic, I quite like the fast and slow attacks. So what you can do is just try each one out. That really does bring out the high end, doesn't it? And the opposite. Ugh, that's got really loud. I quite like. So to keep it simple, maybe just leave it on that fast attack. And then I'm up to nearly -4. And the last thing I would put on is an adaptive limiter. Because this means I can limit it to -1. And I can add some gain to get it. So what you can do is you can boost the gain to increase the level, but at the same time you are limiting it to only going to -1 dB. It's only gone to -2. If you find yourself having to push the gain massively, you probably want to go back and increase the levels overall, because this is where you do not want to be increasing the volume. It's handy to have it there because you know it's the last part of your signal. And that's pretty much it. That's how I would go about doing a mix of a cue. So the first thing we did was went through and soloed each instrument and put an EQ on it to get rid of any lows or highs that we know we don't want. Then we put all the faders to 0, negative infinity, and brought them in slowly one by one, keeping an eye on the stereo output. When we were happy with that at about -7, -8, then I went through and added 5 things that I know work in that order and I have successfully used. I used that theory for quite some time on a lot of tracks. Obviously, you're changing the amounts each time, and that is sort of the sequence that you will get from using something like ozone. Because if we look at ozone, well, I'm not going to play this because it'll go horribly wrong. But in the presets, you will see they have an equalizer, dynamics, exciter, dynamic EQ, and a maximizer, which is like the adaptive limiter. So it's very similar. It's just it's all built into one thing, one plugin. But you can do it yourself, and actually it's probably worth having a go at this so that you can turn these on and off individually. I know you can do it within Ozone, but it is a great way of actually learning what these different things do. So Space Designer for some reverb, or an exciter, the stereo spread, a multipressor, and then the adaptive limiter at the end. Let's see what that sounds like in the first part. And keep an eye on the stereo out, because that should be the loudest part that we've just done. So this shouldn't go to -1 yet. If you are interested in finding out how that track was actually constructed, don't forget the 10 o'clock Sunday Music School, which I've had to pre-record, but it's going out at 10 o'clock on Saturday. I go from zero, didn't know what I was doing, to creating pretty much that, which we have now mixed. I hope you found that useful, and thumbs up, subscribe, always much appreciated. Have a lovely rest of your day. Bye for now.